After that, we will listen to 2 presentations, which then joins our discussion. And finally, Dr. Sang Lim will have a short talk to end our seminar today. So, to kick off the program, please allow me to invite Dr. Nga Phan to give her welcome speech. Please.
Thank you, Gwen. Good morning, colleagues and students. Today, we warmly welcome 2 guest speakers, Dr. Jocelyn Lee and Dr. Judy Miang Kun, to share with us some hands-on experience in doing research which follow the tenets of research ethics. Dr. Jocelyn completed her PhD studies in applied linguistics from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. She is a senior lecturer at the University of Technology Mara in Malaysia. Dr. Jocelyn has received a number of research grants and currently holds several important research positions, such as editor-in-chief, head of the ethics committee, head of research, and chairpersons of journals and conferences. Dr. Judy completed her PhD studies in general and applied linguistics from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. Currently, she is a lecturer teaching critical studies, focusing on critical thinking, research skills, and academic writing in Hebei University, China, that is partnering with the University of St. Lancashire, England. Before this position, she has academically worked in Malaysia, New Zealand, and China. She enjoys conducting qualitative and action education research in finding solutions to improve teaching and learning in the area of assessment and feedback. The topic of the seminar today is research ethics. Research ethics are important for a number of reasons. They promote the aims of research, such as expanding knowledge. They support the values required for collaborative work, such as mutual respect and fairness. It is essential because scientific research depends on collaboration between researchers and groups. Research ethics are moral principles that guide researchers to conduct and report research without deception and intention to harm the participants of the study or members of the society as a whole, whether knowingly or unknowingly. I'm optimistic that all participants will acquire new skills and knowledge from the seminar, and I would encourage all participants to take active parts in the interesting discussion. To end my speech, please allow me to wish the 2 guest speakers all the best for your successful presentation. Thank you. Please turn on your microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nga, for your welcome speech. And I know for sure you don't want to be kept waiting. So I would like to invite Dr. Jocelyn to give us her amazing presentation. Dr. Jocelyn?
Good morning, everybody. Just to check my microphone, can you hear me? And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Miss.
Thank you.
Let me adjust a little bit. Okay. All right. Oops. Okay. It is an honor to be invited, especially by Dr. Nga, for this special arrangement. Dr. Nga from the Industrial University of Ho Chi Minh City. It is my privilege. To many people, ethical practice in research is something that is unheard of. You probably think that the ethics dimension of research does not exist. So with the topic research ethics, what should novice researchers know? This is an overview of my presentation this morning. First, allowed me to define the research ethics, and then I will explain several critical and crucial elements in research ethics, such as human subjects, informed consent, power relations, independence and conflicts of interest, moral principles, and also my own experience of a researcher. Before we talk about research ethics, it is important to know what ethics is. The word ethics is derived from a Greek word, ethos, which means character. What does that mean? It is dealing with what is good or bad, with moral duty and obligation. In fact, it is a set of moral principles. This is a definition given by the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Now, we are all working for universities. There are some students in our midst here. We all have to adhere to a code of ethics of your university. For example, your working attires. And probably if you are the staff of the university, you have to meet deadlines. So these are part of the code of ethics. Or when you set examination papers, you cannot disclose to anyone. Yeah, or there are things that, for example, in my universities, certain things we cannot communicate through the social media. It has, for something formal, we have to communicate via emails. Now, these are part of those code of ethics that we need to abide. So what is research ethics? It is generally defined to be the moral principles of planning, conducting, and reporting of research to protect the interests of the public, the participants, and the researchers. In Britannica, it says that ethics and morality are closely related. So next I will talk about the, oops, sorry. There's one slide missing there. Would like to talk about the human subjects, yeah? The human subjects. As long as your research involves human subjects, you have to apply for ethical practice of research. For example, in social science research and clinical research. Now, in social science research, it is less dramatic. What do I mean by that? Because in social science research, for example, you conduct research in your classroom, it will not cause physical injuries, as in medical research. Like when you want to study the student's motivation, right? It's probably cause stress or make your students uncomfortable, but it will not cause any physical injuries. So, but in medical research, doctors are dealing with patients, or and pharmaceutical industries for example, they want to test their products, their investigational products or drugs or even vaccine. The clinical trial of the drug is the study conducted. And during the trial period, there might be some adverse events following immunization, AEFI, or deaths. These are the physical injuries. So next slide, I just want to show you something which is so current and the time that we are in. Now, this is the VIRS analysis. Second, you can see that on the website, a summary for COVID-19 vaccines through December 31st, 2021. Yeah, this is in the US website. A summary of what happened. As you can see here, and they have caused adverse effects. Yeah, over 1 million. Life-threatening events, 24,000. Number of hospitalization, number of deaths. Yeah, so these are the summary of that cause physical injuries and deaths. Next slide my next slide will shows the death cases from January 1st to 31st. Now, the question is whether this is revealed to the public. According to the VIAS US from the US website, there's only 10% reported. Only 10%. Yeah, the doctors will report this online, or the people who suffer injuries or their death cases, the next of kin will, report that on the online system. So what my point is, as long as we are dealing with human subjects, these are the possibilities that will happen. Okay, this is what I want to talk about. Yeah, social science research and clinical research. So if we are the educators or students, our research most likely will be social science research. If you are from the medical studies, then your research is dealing with critical research. The next thing that is very, very important is informed consent. I put the word free here. I'll explain it in a little while. What is informed consent? Informed consent is that participants have the rights to be informed about the nature of a research study and its risks and the benefits to them before they give their consent to participate in the study. The potential risks needs to be, you need to inform the students about the potential risks. In the Malaysia Guideline for Good Clinical Practice, the 4th edition, 2018, it is said that the participants have to be voluntarily confirms their willingness to take part in a study or a trial after having been informed of all aspects of the trial. Pay special attention, all aspects. What are the aspects? They cannot be tricked, they cannot be lied to. Yeah, they have to informed of all the both risks and the benefits. It has to be transparent. So informed consent involves some of these items listed on the screen. It is a basic human right. It is our rights. Yeah? It is to safeguard participants from any mental or physical harm, as in social science research. We don't want to put them in a situation where it causes them distress. To know that they have to know the potential risks that may arise. What are the risks? What are the adverse effects? What are the things that are there in the trial? To know the procedures, the process of conducting the research. Yeah, and what are the expectations on the part of the researcher and participant? The duration, how long it is? Is there any compensation if should any adverse events happen? The participation is voluntary, right? And throughout the process of conducting the research or gathering the data, the participant have the right to decide. Yeah, they can decide maybe halfway they withdraw, or they should not be pressured at all, should not be coerced or forced. In other words, they have to be fully informed. There should be a full disclosure of both the risks and the benefits. Okay, more definition on the informed consent, because it is so important. You need to obtain the understanding of the participants. Yeah, let's look at another definition by Canali Miller 2009. Participants must fully understand at the level known to the researcher at that point the meaning of the study and truly volunteer to participate in it. Yeah, they are not pressured or not forced. Researchers, another definition, researchers have an obligation to non-malfeasance that requires doing no harm. In other words, it does not pose any threats or any harms to the participants. Yeah, this is important. So risks, in other words, I repeat one more time, the risks have to make known to the participants. Or sometimes people play around with the language just to mitigate the seriousness, the severity, yeah, of the effects. Yeah, this is a form of deception as well. So, for instance, the time that we are in right now, right, about the mass vaccination, you have heard of the term anti-vaxxers. Now, according to Robert Malone, the inventor of mRNA, he said that this word anti-vaxxers is demoralizing. Why? Because it involves attacking a person's character or motivation. It's appeal to the emotion of the participants rather than to logic and reason. Yeah. So let's move on. So the participants are protected. They have to be protected. They are free to withdraw anytime throughout the process of your research. Your research may incur different stages, right? Maybe the first round, your participants are willing, and later on, or one or two say they disagree. They are free to stop anytime. They are informed of how you use the data. Yeah, the degree of anonymity and confidentiality. What does that mean here? That means the names are not revealed, and everything you collected, you are the one who knows, the researcher. There is such a degree of confidentiality. Where you publish the findings, you ought to inform the during your ethics application as well. Yeah, because your participants need to know. Only the principal researchers has the access to the information. How the data are stored, how you keep the data, because it's personal. For instance, in a clinical study, the doctors will know all the particulars of the patients, the sickness, the date of birth, and all that stuff. How do you store the data? Where do you keep them? What you do with the data that are not needed? When you're not needed, where do you keep them? Are you going to discard them? So it is important that as a researcher, you have to obtain participants' free and informed consent. Free in this context, it means they are not coerced, they are not pressured. The next thing that is so crucial is the power relations. What are power relations? There are two types of power relations: symmetrical and asymmetrical relationships. Symmetrical relationships are a balanced mutual relationship based on similar allocations of power resources. In other words, both sides, we are talking about research, so both the researchers and the participants, they have the equal level of power, right? As opposed to asymmetrical relationships, which are unequal. It is a relationship, that's a definition, between the small and the great, the weak and the strong, or the rich and the poor, right? The one who has all the authority as opposed to the weaker ones. So in dealing with human subjects, in your participants, there is a distribution of power. Whether you like it or not, it does exist. Normally it is unequal and hierarchical. Such research raises many ethical and methodological dilemmas. Yeah. So there are power relations during different stages. Like in a research study, right from the beginning, when you spot some problems, as you prepare for even your proposal and the review of literature, yeah, you look at the different theories and during your data collection period, and why after data collection you have the analysis and interpret your report. There are power relations. Now, what kinds of power relations? If you are the supervisors, yeah, you are the supervisor, and you are supervising several students, so there are different degree of power, so it's symmetrical. How are you going to reduce that? Yeah. Or a researcher and your students, your participants. If your participants are your students, the relationship is a symmetrical, unequal relationship. Or perhaps your participants are a group of children, young children, right? You are an adult researcher. Your participants are young children. How do you reduce that kind of different power that exists? Now, our research needs to be independent and at all costs avoid conflict of interest. So, in other words, the research must be independent. Both researchers and the research institutions must not depend on their commissioners. Commissioners are the member who are given the authority, right? Cannot be dependent on them. You cannot depend. For example, your donor or your sponsor, right? They give the money for you to conduct research. So if your data shows otherwise, does your sponsor have a say? If they have a say, then your research is dependent on them. It's not independent, and there will be conflict of interest. Yeah, a convergence of interest that threaten the independence of the research, as the example I gave just now. Your sponsor might have a lot of say in your research. Then the findings will not be reliable because they intervene. So it has to be independence. I will give you an example here. Years ago in my daughter's school, there was a rap case. It involves a science teacher in the laboratory, in the lab, right? The school reported to the police. This happened in Sabah, Kota Kinabalu. But the police, the whole case was covered up. It was not in the newspaper. It was covered up. But the victim was from Singapore. There was no action taken, so the whole family moved back to Singapore. They lodged a report in Singapore and opened up the case. Yeah. Then only we got to know what happened in the school. Now, so in this case, it is the conflict of interest, right? Conflict of interest means there's a personal tie. Somebody is involved because as the example I gave just now, the rapist's father was the police chief, right? So there was a degree of conflict of interest, you see? So the case was not being properly investigated. But later on, because it was open, they lodged the report in Singapore, then of course, the rapist was arrested and serving the jail term. So this is an example. And also another example I could give is in one of the universities in Malaysia, one professor, he was from the political science department. Because he's a political scientist, so he conduct studies in the field before the election of our country. But his research is on to find out the response on the ground, what parties would win. Yeah, the what parties, there were several parties contesting. He wanted to find out in general what are the results of the election. Yeah, they want to predict. So, but the outcome showed otherwise. Showed the opposition most likely would win at that time. Now, guess what? Our government intervened. The politicians intervened. Question his credibility, question his qualification, and saying that his research tools were not properly conducted or properly done. Now, there is a degree of conflict of interest, number one. Number two, independence. So we are trying to have the academic, yeah, the academia should be free from all these government. There should not be any ties, any relationship. We are an independent body. This is something that we need to achieve on. In the next slide, so this shows the integral part of ethics and integrity. Yeah, there is an integral part of ethics and integrity. So at all costs, avoid the conflict of interest, as you can see in the graphic here. Giving favors to relatives and close friends, or someone acts in their own interests rather than the interests of the organization, or maybe the judges, if there is a relationship, so the judge will take sides. Now, all this shows there is a conflict of interest. Maybe the sponsors or maybe the investors invest in the pharmaceutical to create this drug. And when this drug causes some side effects, but you don't get to report the true outcome, you report what the good part about it, or you falsify the figures or the facts. That is the conflict of interest. It somehow will affect the findings. First, it is unethical, and another one is there's no reliability. So, to sum up, these are the moral principles of to guide your research. In your selection of your participants, who are your participants? This is very important. Are they children? How do you talk to the children? The language. Do they understand what you're talking about? Or maybe your participants are a group of parents who are not so educated. And in your questionnaires or in the research information, is it clear? Is the language simple enough for them to understand? The design of your study. How do you design the study? The sampling procedure. How do you conduct the research? The language that can be understood, as I've said just that earlier. Is that too difficult for them? Or maybe they are English is not their first language. Would you use their mother tongue instead? Yeah. And you must have informed consent. They must know the risks and the potential risks and probably the benefits in order to participate in your study. And your research findings, what and where do you publish? What are you going to publish? Where to publish? And is there or are there any research benefits? Right, the next part is my ethics application as a researcher. My experience of a full-scale study, right? So these are the steps that I went through. First, I have the proposal ready. And here you see, I put here, I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way because my alma mater, University of Waikato, did not really have a session like what you are having today. Or probably I missed it. I don't know. Probably we'll hear from Dr. Judy later on. Yeah, there is we as international students, when we enroll, we were in the dark, so to speak. We did not know that there was this so-called research ethics application. We were not told, and probably my institution, my alma mater, overlooked this part that international students, such as you and I, coming from this part, we have not, back then, do not have a research ethics committee. So we will not know about this, right? So there was things that went on here, which is not pleasant, that I have to do it again. And, it involves the supervisor. So again, this is not just about proposal and ethics application. It involves power relations as well, because the supervisor did not inform the supervisee, and the table was turning to the international students. So this is a very unpleasant situation. So I had to reapply and have a change of supervisors. Yeah. And then when I finally got it done, I have to submit it to the research review board of University of Waikato. And there were some changes need to be made. They have to review my paper, certain things that is not, I did not submit. For instance, the participant, the research information, yeah, maybe the tools that are applied, will that pose danger or harm to my participants? Now, I strike out this one, University of Technology, Mara. That's my university. Back then, my participants were from the University of Technology, Mara. But then, at that time, in my university, there was no research review board, right? So it was totally within my jurisdiction as a researcher, right? So I did not go through the number point, this University of Technology, Mara, because there was none at that time. So I conducted research after getting the approval from the Research Review Board of University of Waikato. Then the process that I had to go through, okay, application of research ethics, there were forms to fill out. I have to construct the letter of research information. What is this for? This one is for your participants, for the subjects. Yeah. What does it involve? How are you going to conduct the research? So I had this done. What are the risks, the harm? Where do I publish? All this stuff that we mentioned earlier on, right? You inform them, you tell them what it is. Then you have to get the consent. So I had my student informed consent. I put it in to bilingual, because my students are bilingual. Malay could be their first language, right? So I put bilingual. This is to make them feel comfortable. They understand what they will go through, right? We don't want to keep them in the dark. So language here is pretty important, right? And anonymity and confidentiality. So in this, I my study was a case studies involves the whole class, in fact, but only a handful of students took part because I give them the informed consent, right? So I have about 10 students in one class. So lecture was on as usual, but only these 10 students who agreed to take part in the studies, I could collect the data. And I have to, there must be some, they have to be kept anonymous. I would not reveal their names, so and so, because they were in my class. At the same time, I was teaching them a course. Yeah, I don't want to sounds like a threat to them. Yeah, so their name was not revealed. I use number. For instance, I would know that number one is so and so, number two is so and so. So when I report the findings, I would not use the name. There was a degree of confidentiality. I just put the number of student number 6. Student number 3 said that. Yeah. And when I interviewed, talking about informed consent and power relation, after I interviewed them, I have interviewed, I would return to them the transcripts, right? What I have, what they said, and for member checking, let them go through to see whether they agreed. This is what you said. Did I understand you well? So we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the participants at all times. All right, this one is from my university, the Research Ethics Committee. The screenshot is taken from the website. It says here it was established in 2004, right? Approved by the Vice Chancellor and established in 2004. They call it the Research Ethics Committee. But in reality, where they fully implemented this was just in 2018. 2018, okay, for all the campuses. My university is a very large university. In Malaysia, we have 13 states, right? I am in the east part, Sabah state, right? The Borneo, or you call it Borneo, Sabah state. So there are 13 branch campuses, and we have about 40 or so, they call it satellite small campuses. So it is big. Most likely when this research ethics committee started, it was in the main campus in Kuala Lumpur, Shah Alam, yeah, in Shah Alam. The other branch campuses, I think we officially started in 2018, yeah, around 2018. So right now we have ethics committee in every state, the branch campuses. And in every faculty, we have a research committee. So we have these research guidelines, as you can see on the screen, Malaysian for Good Clinical Practice, published by the Ministry of Health. We also have a research ethics committee, this by the university, and also we also refer to good clinical research practice. There's another one which you cannot see on the screen, is the International Ethical Guidelines for Health-Related Research Involving Humans. This is prepared by the Council for International Organizations of Medical Sciences in collaboration with the World Health Organization, published in 2016. Another one is the guidelines provided by this Handbook for Good Clinical Research Practice, GCP, Guidance for Implementation, World Health Organization. Yeah, in all of these, they give you the guidelines that you need to follow. Yeah, and this is the sample of comments by the ethics committee, right? When someone needs to apply for ethics application, this one is a sample, the feedback given. So this researcher wanted, this is the topic, addressing communication apprehension in public speaking. So this researcher or a group of researchers want to find out the anxiety or fear caused in public speaking. So they applied for the ethics. Then this is the response given by the ethics committee. You can have a look at that. The description of the study states that the research aims to identify the level of communication apprehensions and sources of self-efficacy among undergraduates, right? So the methods involve observation, interview, intervention. So upon reviewing the research details, there were a few issues. What were the issues? This research is dealing with human subjects. Who were they? The undergraduates. So the researcher cannot claim that it does not involve human participants. The researcher wanted to apply for the exemption from ethical review, saying that this does not involve human participant, but is disapproved. Yeah? It's truly the students were involved. So the research involves observation of human subjects during the intervention process. So the participants may feel uncomfortable or vulnerable during data collection, right? They may be, you put them in stress. You have some observer in the classroom, an external observer, watching them. They don't feel easy, and their learning might be affected too. So all these you need to figure out, you need to anticipate all these things will happen and put down in your research ethics application. Okay, and also information about who the participants will be and how many will be involved should be provided. Right, so all these things need to be mentioned. So these are just some of the samples. I will show you that when someone applies for ethics application. Right. So in conclusion, if you are a researcher, it is important that you formally apply for research ethics approval. Now, if your university does not have an institutional review board or IRB or research ethics committee REC, then it is timely to set up one. So this session is a very good start. Yeah, you kickstart the whole thing about research ethics application. So thank you very much. That's all of my presentation.
Thank you very much for a wonderful talk, Dr. Jocelyn. And now I would like to call upon Dr. Judy to give us her wonderful presentations. Dr. Judy?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And can you see my slides?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to your seminar this morning. And so this is the outline of my presentation. So I will talk about definitions of ethics, and I will focus on the definition of research ethics. And I'll explain to you why ethical research is important. And I will also give you the definition of what is research misconduct, the causes of research misconduct, why are research misconduct harmful, who is responsible for ethical research, how do researchers identify risk, and then I will explain to you my experience of doing ethical research, and I will conclude my talk by explaining to you the lessons that I learned through this process. So let me begin by the definitions of ethics. So ethics here refers to the study of what ought to be done or not ought to be done. It also describes a body. So there must be a body that guide people. Okay, what is good behavior, what is bad behavior, and ethical decisions here involve the process of identifying, evaluating, and choosing options that has ethical dimension. So what kind of problems have ethical dimensions? So those that involve and may impact humans. So let me give you an example. Let's say there is a company that sells milk. And of course, the company wants to improve their sales. So there are a few solutions. So for example, solution number one, they can choose to have interesting advertisement to boost their sales. Or number two, the farmers can make the cows produce more milk. But how do they do that? Perhaps they can feed the cows with certain kind of food. Unfortunately, sometimes the food that they feed the cows, the milk that the cow processes, okay, has negative effects towards the consumer. So let's say if the consumer drink the milk, they might have negative effects like they get sick or babies may die. So here they have an ethical dilemma. Okay, so which one should they choose in order to improve their sales? So of course, if they are ethical, they will choose option number one. That means make more advertisement. But if they care more about money, they don't care about others. So they just produce milk, more milk, and they don't care if people die or have negative side effects. So now let me zoom down to what is research ethics. So research ethics means the actions that need to be done by scientists in the setting of the research, that the research must protect the human participants, not harm them. Okay. So before that, okay, so there is a scientist called Hwang Woo-suk. He's from South Korea, and he claimed to have cloned human embryos from the stem cells. And human clones have been cloned before, but then most of the embryos die quickly. Okay, so in November 2005, Hwang admitted to use the eggs given by his researcher. So that is very unethical of him. And And December that same year, his colleague, one of his colleagues, came out and claimed that Huang's research is all actually false. Okay, so he made up all those findings, which is also unethical and very harmful to human participants, especially he took the eggs, okay, from his fellow researcher, okay, without consent. So the golden rule is do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So for example, if you want people to treat you with patience, with kindness, you must treat others the same way. You must treat people with the same kindness and patience. So basically this philosophy is based on the Judeo-Christian traditions. And this is also the basis for professional bodies such as the American Psychology Association. Okay, so they adopt this code of ethics for research. So in the research ethics, okay, so there are certain guidelines that researchers need to follow so that they will not do unethical research that will harm human participants in specific situation. So why is ethical research important? So in the past, in history, scientists, they do not have certain rules and guidelines. So as a result, especially during the Second World War, the Nazi soldiers, okay, they captured a lot of prisoners, especially the Jews, and they throw them into the prison camp. And what they did was the Nazi doctor, okay, conduct experiment on this prisoner. Even though the prisoner didn't want to do the experiment, they were forced. So that is not ethical at all. So the Nuremberg Code was written in 1947 because of this incident. And the Declaration of Helsinki was also done by the World Medical Association in 1964. And they also expand the Nuremberg Code to protect human participants, okay, whenever scientists wants to do their research, okay? And why is ethical research important, especially when you're doing experiment or research on human participants? Also, there was a study, okay, this is a US government, which is funded by the government in Alabama. This research was done on many Black African United States men with syphilis. Syphilis is actually a kind of sexual disease, okay? But all these American men were not told that they have the disease. So that is very unethical. They were not advised they had the disease. And they were also not advised how to treat the medicine. Okay, they can actually be treated, but they were not told, okay? So as a result, sorry. All right, so as a result, in the 1979 Bellman Report, a seminar on research ethics in the United States, okay, they list out 3 important principles in ethics research. So number 1, you always need to respect people, okay? Respect people here means you need to protect the privacy of the participants, okay? So whatever the participants say, you need to keep it a secret among yourself. You don't say out the name. And the research must benefit others, okay? And number 3, justice for people. That means the research that you do mustn't, the research that you do also must benefit all people. Don't care whether you're black, white, yellow, it must benefit people. Okay, so now I move on to the definition of research misconduct. So basically there are 3. Number 1, fabrication. Number 2, falsification. Number 3, plagiarism. Okay, so fabrication here means you change the data, okay? That means you're not happy with the result, you change the information because you want the result to suit your agenda, okay? Number 2, falsification. Falsification here means you change the way, okay, you collect the data. So for example, let's say in the report, you say that you did interview, but actually in the actual research, you didn't do the interview. So that is actually a form of falsification. Or you didn't put in the results, all the results. So you pick and choose what you like, okay? And research misconduct also don't include the honest mistake or participants that do not agree with you, you don't put inside. So these are examples of research misconduct. So the causes of scientific misconduct. Why do people do scientific misconduct? For example, like the scientist from South Korea that I mentioned, Dr. Kwong, okay? Perhaps he wanted fame because he claimed that he's the first scientist that managed to clone human embryos. So arrogance, ambition, and some because they want to cheat people of the money. So greed. So they purposely falsify their findings so that people will give them more money to do the funding, but the money that they get, they use it for their own pleasure. Okay, maybe they buy big houses, big cars. Okay, so these are the causes of scientific misconduct. So why are research misconduct harmful? So number one, if let's say the scientists are given opportunities to give fake result, then the purpose of conducting the research is lost. What for you do the research when you want to fake it, right? So the trustworthiness is jeopardized, it loses meaning, and it can be also practical. So for example, many of the embryos, okay, human embryos died during the scientific conduct, okay? So it brings harm to the people. And if let's say you're doing research on the environment, so instead of protecting Earth from more pollution, you make the Earth more polluted, okay? And the last one, plagiarism. So it is very important that you acknowledge your researchers or your colleagues' work. So for example, let's say Jocelyn, Dr. Jocelyn, managed to find a vaccine, okay, that can solve the problem of COVID once and for all. That means people don't have to go for further injections anymore. So, but I'm also interested in the research. So I said, oh, I'm the one who found out this new medicine. Imagine how Jocelyn feels. Of course, Dr. Jocelyn will be very angry, isn't it? So she will feel very demotivated. So that is not good, okay? So how to avoid research misconduct? So there are 4 suggestions. So number 1, you need to identify and understand the scientific ideals. The character or the individual researcher must be upright and moral, okay? Number 3, the organization structures need to prevent scientific misconduct. And lastly, you need to give justice and you need to consider your colleagues. That's very important. So number 1, you need to identify and understand the scientific ideals. So Robert Merton, he is actually a social scientist. He established this ethos or guidelines in 1990. He said that when a scientist conduct research, they need to apply the principle of disinterestedness when doing research. Now, what's the meaning of disinterestedness? It means that whenever a researcher conduct research, they cannot allow the economy, the religious and ideological interests to influence the result of the data. That means they cannot include all this into their research. Okay. Point number 2, the character of the individual researcher must be upright, because researchers, okay, they are educated. So people with high education need to have characteristics such as honesty, diligence, courage, and they are also expected to adopt to the culture of the society. So for example, the society, especially in Asia here, we are expected to obey the authority figures. So we need to apply that when we conduct our research. We also need to analyze the structure that form the community, okay? And the organizational structures also is very important. So as scientists, there are guidelines or standards that promote good behavior among scientists on a very on a global macro level, big level. So all the scientists all over the world must understand and be guided by these rules from various countries. And later on, these standards and guidelines must also follow in a macro level, smaller levels in each university, institutes, and department. Plagiarism, as I mentioned just now, you need to acknowledge, okay, the author's original or innovative ideas to give them justice and fairness. So you need to do citation. That is why when you're writing up your thesis and when you're doing your research, you need to do citation and referencing. If you don't, that means you're not respecting your other colleagues, right? And it will demotivate your other friends, okay, or your colleagues. So who is responsible for ethical research? Everybody who are doing research, including the supervisors who are supervising you and students, right? So you are responsible for ethical research. So how do researchers identify risks? So regardless what kind of research you're doing, classroom research, or it could be research done in a society, you have responsibility to protect your participants. So number one, you need to think of the risks that people might face. You need to think, how big are those risks? Are the risks big or the risks small? But whatever it is, you need to minimize those risks. So identify them and then think how you're going to protect your participants from all those risks. So here I would like to suggest 3 things. Number one, think about what is your research project. Number two, how are you going to collect your data? And number 3, how are you going to store your data? So what are you researching? So social scientists, all right? I think all of us are social researchers because we are interested to know how humans solve problems, okay, behaviors. So when you ask participants questions, you're always interested about their experience, their behavior, their opinions regarding certain issues. But their privacy, the participants' privacy are at risk. So for example, let's say you're interested to find out ex-drug addicts' behavior, okay? You want to know why do drug addicts, okay, they are attracted to take drugs, how they overcome the problem, how they manage to stop taking drugs. So when you ask questions like this to people, it can be very sensitive. And when your participants participate, they are very nervous because imagine they talk about something bad which they did in the past. So this poses psychological risk to them. And if other people found out that this participant used to be a drug addict, whoa, goodness. So their reaction towards that participant also will be affected because, again, social risk, people will have a negative view of the person. And imagine if, let's say the person is their employer or their future employer, oh, this person is a drug addict, so I don't want to hire this person. Okay, oh, maybe I should fire them because they used to be drug addicts. So again, this poses economical risk to the participants. And how are you going to collect the data is very important. So if you conduct one-to-one interview with this person, then the privacy is safe. Okay, so their secret is with you. But if you have group interviews, the data is no longer private anymore because the other person know, okay, what are the illegal activities you used to do. So again, your participants' privacy is not protected. And as Dr. Jocelyn mentioned, how you store the data. Once you collect all your data, are you going to keep it in the internet, on the cloud, or on your computer, or in the files of the university? So whatever things that you do, make sure your data cannot be accessed by third parties, okay, or like companies who want to find out information about the customers, okay? So that's very important. Make sure you keep it safe. And how do you identify risks, okay? There are 2 ways I could suggest. Perhaps you can do literature review. That means you do some reading about the past research. how they overcome ethical issues, okay? And you can also talk to people who have done research in your area so that you can try to minimize the risk that you pose to your participants. And other ethical issues that needs to be considered, I think Jocelyn has already covered this. So if let's say you want to interview those handicapped people, okay, maybe students who have limited learning abilities. So you need to make sure that these students really understand, okay, the content of your research. And if they have limited English proficiency, let's say you are doing the research in English, make sure your participants understand them. So you have to do translation, okay, in their mother tongue. And if you are interviewing, let's say, children, if they are less than 18 years old, you need to get approval from their parents or their guardian. And sometimes, okay, some people that participate in your study, they might have difficulty to say no, okay, because of the power relationship. So for example, let's say a teacher wants to conduct the research in class. The student, although they don't feel like participating, they are afraid to say no. Why? Because they are afraid that you might dislike them or you might give them lower marks. So that is again the power relationship. And you need to learn about your university ethics requirements. So what is required by your university regarding the ethics application, all right? And I mentioned this again, always remember, respect your participants. You must guarantee your participants that your research brings more good rather than harm, and your research must have justice, and it must benefit everyone regardless of the color of the skin. Okay, so now I want to give an example of how I was trained to do ethical research. Okay, so the title of my thesis was Bridging the Mismatch Between the Lecturers and the Students' Belief About the Value of Written Feedback on their assignment. So my study was done among the students and lecturers of a Malaysian private university. And my approach here is to tell you how I identify the risks and how I protect my participants from potential harm. And of course, I need to get approval from the Human Research Ethics Committee before I actually collect the data. So I did a mind map and I plan on the participants selection, and I plan how do I collect my data collections method, and what are the potential risks when I'm collecting the data. So unlike Jocelyn, I had a very good supervisor. So he guided me on how to write the proposal. And also in the planning stage, okay, so how do I select my participants? So I am aware many lecturers will be reluctant to participate. Just imagine if, let's say, they're afraid that maybe when they tell me their techniques of giving feedback, I may think, oh, this is the wrong way of giving feedback. So there are issues of they losing face, and maybe they are afraid that I may take all this information and I may give this information to the management, which of course I didn't. So they are afraid, you see. So that's why they might be reluctant to participate. So I think, okay, perhaps I should reassure them to say that their identity is protected. So I don't put their name. So Dr. Wong said this. No, I would say lecturer A or lecturer B or lecturer C. And also I knew that the students might be afraid to tell me the truth about their lecturer's feedback. Of course, they are afraid to say, oh, my lecturer never give me feedback. Because again, if they say this, they're afraid that I will tell them the lectures, and then they're afraid of getting bad results. So again, maybe I should show them the summary of the transcript to the students to show that their names are not written there. When I show the summaries of transcript to the lecturer, I say student A, student B. So these are how this helped me, okay, to select the participants and overcome the issue of power relationship. And the data collection methods also, again, the interview with students, they may be afraid to tell me the truth about the lecturers. So I will reassure them their identity is protected. And think aloud session. Okay, so let me just quickly explain to you how I collected my data. So first of all, I decided to recruit, okay, the lecturers participants by giving them a questionnaire. And of course, each questionnaire will have the letter of consent to tell them what is the research about, and if they're interested, they need to sign to participate in the study. And after getting the questionnaire from the lecturers, then only I distribute the questionnaires to the students, and I interview the lecturers, individual interviews, okay? And I also did the interviews with the students, and I observed the lecturers doing the think aloud session. So the think aloud session here means I observe the lecturer giving feedback and grades to the student while they say, okay, so whatever they think about the students' work, they say it out and mark the paper at the same time. So I knew that some of the lecturers may not be used to do this activity. So what happened is I type out the lecturer's transcript, but of course I didn't put the lecturer's name. Again, I use pseudonyms, all right? And also I need to prepare the ethical application. So I need to write letters to the gatekeepers, and also to explain, I even attach all my questionnaire, all my questions for the interview, and I explain to them how the research is done so that they know, and also give them the choice to continue or to withdraw, okay? And once my ethical application was approved, and I sent all the letters and data using email to the president of the college, and it's approved. And then only then I went back to Malaysia to collect my data. All right, there are other issues of qualitative research, because my research is qualitative research. So the issue was qualitative research has issue of validity and reliability, because how we collect the data, how we interpret the data and the report is highly subjective. So it is very important that the qualitative researcher need to ensure trustworthiness, ensure that the research is conducted in a manner which is valid and credible. So how do I as a researcher establish trustworthiness? So Lincoln, okay, suggested I need to triangulate my data, and naturalistic indicators means whatever the participants say, I need to use that and feed it into the theory. And also I need to do member checks, okay, being truthful in my research. So in my research, I try to be trustworthy by establishing my position as the researcher in the research field. I need to pilot the data collection methods. I conduct member checks to respondent validation, triangulation, and being truthful. So let's look into the points. So my role as the researcher, as Dr. Jocelyn mentioned, conflict of interest. So I, as a researcher, was independent because I went there. The funds are all my own. Okay, so there's the management of the university are not involved at all when I was doing the research. And I didn't have any power relationship with the participants, that means the lecturers or the students. So I need to explain that to my participants when I try to recruit people for my research. So one of the advantages of being an insider, because I used to work in that university before, so I was able to get friends to help me. And of course, I get their consent. Okay, it's not that because you're my friend, I join. No, I still need their signature to say that they are willing to participate. And another benefit of being an insider was I know, okay, why certain lecturers behave in a certain way because of the system and the regulation of the institution. So that was the advantage. But there were also disadvantage also. Perhaps, okay, because I was so used to the system, I may overlook certain behavior. So when I went to the research field, I need to tell myself, okay, be open-minded. Okay, try not to impose your beliefs. Okay, so I try to be disinterestedness. Okay, remember that term. Okay, I cannot apply my beliefs into my findings. Okay, so I also pilot all my questions. All right, piloting here means you test out your question. So all my questions, okay, the questionnaires, the interview questions, I carry it out. That means I test it out on my friends in New Zealand and also friends in Malaysia. So I asked them to answer those questions because I want to see if the questions are clear or not. That's very important. If the questions are not clear, that is very dangerous. So it's very important that you pilot the questions, you test out, okay? And it is very important to conduct member checks to respondent validation. So what I did was, I don't want my beliefs, okay, to be in the data. So what I did was, after I interviewed the lecturers and the students, I did the summary, okay, to take the main points, and then I show the lecturers and even the students to read and to clarify if this is what they say. If it's not, then they need to tell me what is wrong with the statement and what they intend to say. So that is very important for verification. And also, my supervisors also check my transcript and findings to make sure I have not misinterpreted the data. So supervisors also play an important role to make sure your students have the right interpretation. Okay, triangulation. This is another way of how I try to be very trustworthy. Triangulation here means the research that is based on a number of collection methods. That means you don't just focus only on one method. That means just only on questionnaire. If you just focus only on one collection method, questionnaire alone, it's no good. It's not valid because there are limitations in the data collection methods. If you conduct your research just using questionnaire, you cannot find out the respondents or the participants' view and opinion. You can only do that through interviews, right? So it is good if you can collect your data in many forms. So through interviews, through observation, so make it a variety, okay? So this, the process of triangulation here also means you compare, all right? So all the data that you collected from the survey, from the questionnaires, you need to see if there is a similarity or differences. So you compare, all right? So that's called triangulation. So what's the conclusion? What are the lessons that I learned through my reflection? It is so important to get ethical approval before conducting any research because it's important that the participants, you know, you need to protect them, all right? And the risk of getting sued, okay, is lesser, okay? So because they have already signed the form saying that I agree to participate, okay? And the process of getting the ethical approval actually helps me, okay, to be very focused. I know, okay, so after this process, after I collect my questionnaire, what is the next data collection method? So very organized because you have already planned. You have already planned the questions, okay? So very systematic and you won't lose any steps. And the process of data collection is easier. Just imagine because they agree to participate in your study. If let's say the person doesn't agree because I'm forced, okay, the dean asked me to do this research, I have no choice, okay, so the reliability of the data is also not so good, okay, so when everything is done on free will, the persons, they are volunteer to do it, then at least it's easier to conduct the research. And it's very important to conduct piloting, okay, to make sure your questions are clear. Because if the questions are not clear, again, you will get the wrong results, okay? And very important, you need to do the member checks to make sure that your data is valid. And this is what the respondent said. Sometimes you can misinterpret what the person said. So it's good to clarify with them. So during the interview, you say this. Is this what you want to say? If the person say yes, then that is true. If it says no, then you need to make the corrections, okay? And doing triangulation is also good to validate the data collected. So I've come to the end of my presentation, and these are the references for my talk today. So I end the presentation, and if there's any questions and answers, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talk, Dr. Judy. And now we will move on to the next part of the program, discussions. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure our amazing presenters, Dr. Jocelyn and Dr. Judy, would be pleased to answer them. So, did anyone have any questions?
Maybe it's me. Jocelyn, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sure, Dr. Nga.
There's something very important that you raised in your presentation, that
Right.
in every university there should be a research committee.
Right.
To tell the truth, research ethics is quite a new thing in here. So what is your suggestion? I mean, how should we start? We have nothing, I mean, almost from scratch. So what steps should we here follow?
You can form a research committee. Maybe, I'm not sure university, do you have different faculties?
Yes.
Several different faculties. Okay, maybe you have a representative from each faculty come together to form a big committee. This is a core committee because it involves people from different disciplines. They come together, right, to form a main one. And then later on, perhaps in every single faculty, there will be a small committee, research committee for that faculty. So all these committee at that respective faculty will be fall under the major faculty. So this is how it works in my university. We have the main one, right? They will, as you can see my slide just now, they have registered with our country, the Ministry of Health for their guidelines and all. They have to comply, right? So they applied for that. So for a start, I think it's good to have a small committee first. You all come together and discuss what are the things, and there are several guidelines that you can use, like for instance the one that I mentioned just now. I'm sure in your country you have the guidelines from the Ministry of Health as well. You can use that. It will be applicable in social sciences, and eventually over time maybe you can draft your own university guidelines that students or lecturers need to follow when they conduct research. Your own guidelines. So after consulting or reviewing all these guidelines by the WHO or International Health Science guidelines, then you come up with your own. Perhaps that can help. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Quite useful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, welcome. Is there any other question?
Can I share something? So actually, what I'm going to say now is not really the question, but this is just from my perspective, from my experiences after I have been supervising the students to do research and also reviewing the research of the students in our faculty. So what I can see is that the first thing is that it is very common for the students to come and then ask some teachers for interviews. They want to interview the teachers or the lecturers in the faculty. And so far, I can see that normally the informants are not very well informed. The students will just say, okay, I would like to interview you. So would that be okay? And then that's all. So from your presentation, I recognize that it is important for the students, once you are working as just like the trainee researcher, for example, in this case. So it is necessary for you to tell the lecturers or any other informants that you intend to interview. Maybe you can go over the questions that you will interview, or maybe at least the kind of like topics or questions, or maybe the main ideas that you want to focus on. So that could be easier for the informants to decide whether they can be willing to take part in the discussion or in the interview. Yeah, and the second thing is about the triangulation. I think it is really important, and but so far in the research papers that I have been reviewing, and then so far I could see that the students still do not pay a lot of attention to the validation of the research results. So once again, it is important to think about that, okay, in order for the research result to be more reliable. Okay, so that is my my sharing from my experiences. Thank you.
I also want to share something here, some background information about me and the two presenters today. Actually, Judy and Jocelyn and I lived in the same house in New Zealand in 2011, and I and Jocelyn had the same chief supervisors, and we both, changed our supervisors. And three of us went to the same research common group, right, Judy? Yeah. And then we both underwent the research ethics application procedures. So we all understand this, and go back to what I'm doing at the moment with my students. Actually, it's not easy to explain to my students why they need to do something to protect the privacy of the participants, or why they need to, let's say, change the name of the lecturers in their data. So they need to, at least they need to change the name of the university. It's not easy to explain for the students, or sometimes for the lecturers, why they need to do so. Yeah, so it will be a long way to apply or even to understand what the speakers shared us today. But actually, as both of the researchers have shared, a research study is not a fake thing, and when we do research, whether we are a student or a lecturer, we need to know about the responsibility of researchers. We need to know about how we protect the privacy of participants. And one of the main things of doing a research study is to bring benefits for all stakeholders, for us as researchers, for the participants, and for the society as a whole. Yeah. So as I said before, it will take quite a lot of time to understand, to recognize, and to implement all these things. Research ethics, we all agree that are very important in doing a research study. something we should aim at, but it's not easy, especially we have many students to take care of. Yeah, that's what I can share here. So I wonder if any staff or students can raise questions for the guest presenters.
Yes, I invite Ms. Lê Ngọc Diệp to have your questions, please.
Yes, I would like to ask if I keep the names of the participants confidential, like Mr. A, Mr. B, but then the reader can guess. So is this my responsibility to make it unable to guess who are the participants? And in another case, after I finish the reports, if some participant can guess who is themselves, and maybe they say that, oh, you describe me as crazy. I don't want to be described like this. I want you to delete my part or to change or something. Is this my responsibility to modify it? Thank you.
Dr. Judy, you want to answer this first?
Okay, as researchers, we are responsible to keep the identity secret, right? But in some cases, it's impossible to totally protect the participants' privacy. But if, let's say this good, that's why to have these member checks, okay? So before you even publish your report, okay, to show them parts, okay, to say, is this what you meant? So once they say yes, then only you publish your report. If not, please refrain from publishing it. Yeah, so this is my view.
Thank you.
I would like to add, if you are the sole researcher, that means you are the only researcher, then there will be nobody else who know the data you collected. If you have a core researcher, you two have to come to an agreement, yeah, the degree of confidentiality. Yeah. And also one thing I need to point out is the language you use in reporting, like words like crazy and all that, like, you know, as I mentioned just now, there are some words that are just demoralizing and attacking the character of a person, that kind of words should be totally avoided. Yeah, you just report your findings, but try not to use all these emotional words that, yeah, which carry different connotation both with the reader. You don't want our students to be demotivated or they are affected mentally. Yeah. This again is another issue of posing threats or emotional trauma. Yeah.
Thank you.
Would also like to share something that I guess is a kind of qualitative research. So it relates to the way you present the data. So instead of coding whole sentences or paragraphs, you can select certain phrases, and you should, as a whole, it should be a kind of group of people with groups of phrases and groups of words. So in such case, it's not easy to identify who says what.
Thank you.
So does anyone have any else questions? FSL student, do you have any questions for our presenters?
May I have a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, my name is Nguyễn Hùng Khanh. I am a lecturer of English at University of Industry in Ho Chi Minh City. I enjoy your presentation very much. Yeah, Dr. Roshid Lee and Dr. Jody Nguyen. Yeah, ethics is a very important matter in research, and it has become more and more important. Nowadays, as a lecturer, I have very many problems with this area. I mean, ethics. Yeah, my question is, does your university offer an official course of ethics in the curriculum? Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Judy?
Okay, the university that I'm based in now, they're starting only to do encouraging research. So I will suggest implementing the ethics group or the committee. So at the moment, the university that I'm working in hasn't done anything yet.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. I'm sorry to interrupt, right? My wish is that, yeah, there will be a center of ethics. I believe it will be established soon in our university. This is
Yes.
a very good measure to prevent plagiarism. Yeah. Thank you very much for your answer, Judy. Sorry, Dr. Judy. Yeah.
Welcome.
Okay, I just want to add, in my university, it's not officially taught, but we have the university ethics committee.
Yes.
So all the staff, starting from the lecturers, they have to attend this and they have to know what is research ethics.
Yes.
And this is crucial, so that in future, that when you are thinking of conducting a study, so that you have to apply for ethics
Yes.
application and get the approval. So there will be a review committee to check whether you have you follow the rules and the guidelines, right? The end result is we protect our participants.
Yes.
That is the most important thing. We do not cause harm to them. Another thing I want to propose, when Dr. Nga asked me a question just now about the structure and all that, perhaps when you don't have a committee at the moment, but
Yes.
you have undergrad students or diploma students, maybe you can get them into some form of ethics application, a general one, probably a template for the information, research information, how to,
Yes.
to describe, when the students
Yes.
undergraduate level, they are not doing full scale research. Probably it's just a mini project of a course. Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe a template, like information, research information, what to put in, how to describe, and the informed consent form, which you want to distribute to your participants. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the students. Yeah. Perhaps
Yeah,
you can start off with these two things, and then for the
Yeah.
staff, you maybe need to a formal ethics application. Somehow your committee has to, you have to form a committee as soon as possible.
Yes. So it's
That's
so
my
lucky.
suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Dr. Yoshilin Lee. Yeah, it's so lucky that your university have a ethnic community, right? Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for your information. Yeah.
Thanks, Jocelyn. And I just want to say something more to Mr. Kang. Actually, in practice, research ethics is not usually a course, but it is an essential part of doing research study in a developed country. So whenever a person wants to conduct a study, he or she needs to apply for a research ethics application. And if that application is approved, then he can proceed his study. If not, he needs to reapply it until he is successful. And for Dr. Jocelyn, your advice is quite practical. I mean, practical for what the faculty will do in the future. I mean, thinking about the documents for the undergraduates, what they need to fill in before they conduct the studies. It's quite practical. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Just one last point I want to add. For our undergraduate, they somehow have to go through the certain momentum of applying, like what I suggested just now. Maybe not a formal one, just to get the habit of, they know that this thing exists, research ethics exists. But for the master's students and PhD students, they have to go through the formal process, okay? A formal application process. They cannot run away from it. But my university now has begun to make every undergraduate to go through. So there are a whole lot of work, but we have a bigger committee, you see, so they are handling all this mess. Right, thank you.
Thank you.
So does any like other lecturers, do you have any questions? Okay. Professor Nga, I think that we could move to the next part. Do you think so? Okay. So thank you all of you for your wonderful questions and wonderful answer from our precious lecturers, presenters, and students. And now I would like to call upon Dr. Sang Wing to express his sincere gratitude to anyone who joined in today's seminars. Please, Dr. Sang Wing.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
actually, I have a internet problem with my internet connection today, this morning. So sorry for this. So good morning, Dr. Jocelyn and Dr. Judy. Good morning, teacher. As a department in a higher education institution, besides teaching, researching is one of our main objectives. Annually, we have hundreds of senior students required to conduct a simple research project related to language teaching and learning in their thesis or graduation report. During the supervising process, we realized that our students have certain problems on ethical issues before, during, and after the data collection phase of their projects. As teachers, we also have some extent of considerations when ensuring that our student research is conducted ethically. So the presentation of Dr. Jocelyn and Dr. Judy this morning are very informative and give us a number of insights and new ideas on ethical issues in research. So let me restate it. Let me restate a definition from a definition of ethics from Dr. Jocelyn PowerPoint slide this morning. Ethics is generally defined to be moral principles of the planning, conducting, and reporting of research. And a researcher has to conduct research study that protects the interests of the public, the participant, and researchers. So under that meaning, we will apply what we discussed today, not only in research, but also in our teaching and even in learning. So thank you for spending time to give such valuable discussion with us this morning. Best wishes to all of you in pandemic and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy and Jocelyn. Thanks a lot for accepting my invitation to be the guest presenter today. What you shared today is very useful and practical for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we hope that there will be more future collaboration, including doing research together.
Definitely, Jocelyn. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Nga Phan, Dr. Sang Wing, Dr. Jocelyn, and Dr. Judy. With that, the seminars is now in full gears. Once again, I would like to send my deepest appreciation to everyone for your participants in this seminar. I hope you enjoyed the program, and goodbye, and wish you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you and goodbye.
Cô ơi, mình tự out được chưa cô?
Tự out được rồi đấy em ơi.
Dạ em cảm ơn.
Không sao đâu em. Mấy em còn lại cũng out được rồi đó.